Hello, everybody. I'm just going to give you a chance to all enter. I don't know how long it sort of takes, but I think I'm going to crack on. So welcome. This webinar is about flexible working and job sharing as a way through COVID-19, the crisis that we're in at the moment and beyond for the TV industry.
Sorry, Michelle, for interrupting. We may just want the participant count to get up to a sizable number first.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know if they were all coming in a flood or if they were trickling.
We can see that there's 442, so they
well, hello to you lot. I think we'll wait then until we've got a good bunch of you, and then we'll start. Anthony, you can give me the thumbs up when we're ready to go.
Yeah, I think 470 sounds reasonable.
That's amazing.
Yes. Okay, go for it.
All right. So welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. We are thrilled and overwhelmed by the amount of you who registered, and we're so pleased. So thank you. My name is Michelle James Reynolds. I work for Share My Telly Job, along with my colleagues who are Natalie and Louise, who you will see on your screens. This event has been very kindly hosted and supported by the Talent Manager. We have Matt Bourne and Sarah Lee, and Sarah will be talking with us later about the amazing job share functionality of the Talent Manager website. We also have Anthony, who is our tech whiz on the call, also from the Talent Manager. If you have any technical problems during today's webinar, please, you can message him directly on the chat function, and he can sort it all out for you. The fact that so many of you have registered today is fantastic. You know, it shows how important this topic is, and especially now, obviously, during COVID. So we're aiming for this session to last an hour, with about 15 minutes afterwards for Q&A. Quick housekeeping. We can't hear any of you. If you want to ask a question, please use the Q&A function, and any comments that you might have, put them in the chat. My colleagues, Lou and Nat, will be also answering your questions as we go along and saving up any of the kind of really, I wouldn't want to say a common question, but ones that come up frequently for us to address at the end. And also, I think some of our panelists may well dive in if they see a question that they feel that they can answer. Closed captioning is available for this session. It's provided by Elaine from MyClearText, and you can find that if you go to the bottom of your screen. There is a closed caption button, and you can also, in there, you can change the size of your subtitling to suit you best. A little bit about us. Share My Telly Job's mission for the last 4 years has been to promote flexible working, and particularly job sharing, as a practical tool to retain freelancers with caring commitments. But we've also stressed that it's also much more than just a nice thing to do to keep the mummies in work or to help them return to work. Job sharing is about retaining extraordinary, diverse and experienced talent. It's about creating access in an industry for underrepresented groups. It's about opening up career progression, addressing the gender pay gap, and also easing people through the current mental health crisis. And we'll be talking about that later on with Alex. It's about providing a kinder way of working, which obviously is something that's very important always, but particularly so during and after a pandemic. I know from my own experience that production schedules really aren't conducive to part-time. Production never stops. But now, more than ever, TV freelancers, huge numbers of the TV workforce need some kind of flexibility. You know, we've got chaotic childcare issues, no grandparents to rely on. There's self-isolation rules you have to adhere to, an enormous mental health strain across our whole industry. There's new workplace practices and guidelines which limit work opportunities for thousands of our talented freelancers. Research has shown that in the face of the lack of work, the lack of any kind of government funding, and now the obvious fragility of our freelance system, that many freelancers are now considering leaving the industry. There's going to be a second wave, potentially, well, with a second wave of coronavirus, considered by many experts to be likely, and long-term changes to the way we live a certainty. We can't plan for short-term fixes, or we can't expect to return to what was. We have to look forward to a new way of working. Everything's changed. And while the industry has adapted during this time of enforced change, we have to continue to embrace new ways, because the old business models just don't work anymore. We at Share My Telejob and the Talent Manager believe there's a real opportunity now for the industry to come together and provide solutions such as job sharing for how we work during COVID-19, and as a way to create a more fair, equal and creative industry in the future. So without any further ado, I would love to introduce our panel. We have Emma Stewart, MBE, from a fantastic organisation called Timewise. We have Alex Pumphrey, CEO of the Film and TV charity. I'm sure we all know what they do and wonderful work. We have Mark James, exec producer from Studio Lambert. Rebecca Kenny-Smith, creative director from Lime Productions. And we have Waqas Ali, who is the manager of HR production at Netflix. And then obviously we have Sarah Lee, who will be talking later on from Talent Manager. Thank you, all of you, for joining us. Welcome. And we're thrilled to have such a great panel. So I think we're going to come to you first, Emma, if that's okay. Just dive right in there. Perhaps you might be able to kind of give us a little bit of an overview of sort of what the impact of COVID-19 has been on the state of the UK economy, and kind of what does that mean for flexible working?
Right, thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and hello all. I'm not sure, Michelle, I can answer that. You probably need an economist for the big picture stuff, but I mean, I think what I will say, and we all know, is it's obviously, you know, COVID has had a huge impact on the UK, both from an economic perspective in terms of how businesses are coping, but also it's had a fundamental impact on how people are thinking about how we work. And, you know, the impacts varies across very different industries. I should say that at Timewise, we're a social business. We specialise in flexible working. We work with hundreds of businesses every year and have done for many, many years to try and help them to improve their approach to flexible working. So as you can imagine, this is an absolutely fascinating time for us. But we work in sectors as diverse as professional services, through to the creative industries, through to construction firms, through to the NHS. Everybody is having to adjust right now. It's hitting frontline industries clearly much harder, as we all know, in terms of people not being able to operate properly. And what we're also seeing is business leaders really recognising they're having to pivot their business models. So as you said, this is about pivoting how you operate, how you ensure that you can certainly continue through this in a commercial capacity, but also pivoting how you enable your people to work differently. And it brings risks, but it also brings huge opportunities when it comes to thinking about some of the things that we have all wanted for a very long time in terms of flexibility. Because what we are seeing in the market as a whole is business leaders realising there is a gap between a global remote working experiment and a long-term systemic, really inclusive approach to flexible working. And this is an opportunity to bridge that gap. And I think it's an opportunity to also try and protect some of the people who we know are going to be hardest hit by COVID, because they will fall out of work because they can't balance work and care, because both are intensified in this period of time as well. So there are risks and there are big opportunities. The challenge is, how do we ensure that we can encourage, support and provide really practical business models for business leaders to be able to take the journey that we want them to, and to help make sure that, you know, talent is able to carry on working, people are able to carry on working at this time, but just working in a very different way.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, COVID has shown just how much is possible in a sort of from a working from a home perspective. But I think it's also, you know, I think it's key to remember that you know, we all went and worked from home with very little prep, with very little kind of tactical idea of how this was all going to work. And it's kind of, I think there's a great difference between sort of, right, we're all working from home and we're all working from home all the time. And that's very different to kind of a tactical and strategic, flexible working plan, I think. And I think, you know, obviously working from home is a great option for, and we will be talking about that when it comes to production as well. But I think, you know, one of the other, so as we kind of move forward and people are beginning to emerge from their homes, you know, we can talk about other models that might work. And one of the models that we were obviously at Share My Telly Job are very passionate about is job sharing. And when I was researching for this webinar, you know, I sort of started looking at how work sharing has been used at other times of economic crisis, such as, you know, 2000 and 2009, the Great Recession. Even back in the Great Depression, work sharing was a massive part of FDR's New Deal, which was amazing. So I thought we could just have a little chat about what is work sharing and how that can be worked into the TV industry and how it basically becomes job sharing. I don't know if you want to start, Emma, or if you want me to kind of pile on.
Yes, maybe. I mean, I would say, so at Timewise, we sort of think about flexible working through 3 different axes. And I think the first thing is, it's important firstly to just understand that we need to understand the concepts of job design. So, you know, jobs can be done in lots of different ways. And there are 3 main axes, you know, how much you work, where you work, and when you work. And not all businesses start thinking about that when they want to hire people and when they want to manage how they can get their best people to perform in their best way. So work share and job sharing is one element of that. It's one element of thinking if you have an issue around business continuity. So in production, and I used to work in production before I do what I do now, so I know it well. You know, as an AP, you know, or whatever your job is, you work for an intense period of time, particularly if you're working on transatlantic shoots from very early in the morning, often to very late at night. You can split your day. So that is one way of thinking about it. The other way of thinking about it is the times at which people are able to work. The point is, we've had a very reactive approach to flexible working for many, many years. We're in what we call a request response, or we have been environment where most organisations wait for someone to ask to work differently to the way they expect them to ask. What we need to do is we need to shift that into a much more proactive approach to flexibility, to say, how can I help you to do your best work in the most efficient way that helps my business, but that enables you to perform at the best time of the day in the best way with the constraints you have. And the more we can have that 2-way dialogue, the more we can make sure that we can retain brilliant people in industries that are leaving because they're not able to balance work and whatever else in their lives they need to do. So I'd answer your question by saying, so understand the concept of job design, and then we can think about job shares, job splits, work shares. And that is something fundamentally that business leaders don't always understand, is I have to design jobs around people, not always think about sort of people being designed around jobs.
That's very, very key. And at the moment we have a very vulnerable workforce in television. And as I said, people have no work. A lot of them have no money coming in from the government or from anywhere else, particularly, you know, and there are a lot of people saying, well, actually, maybe TV isn't compatible with being a grown-up. You know, how can I work in TV and pay my mortgage and, you know, look after my kid, raise a family, or whatever it is. So I think it's important when we talk about, yes, companies need to start thinking proactively about how to look after their workforce, but also it's a business case for themselves. I think, you know, one of the interesting things about work sharing, and it was used, you know, through 2008 and 2009, it was used all over Europe as a way of retaining their workforce. So what they would do is they would reduce the amount of hours but keep the same amount of people. So they weren't laying people off. The way that could translate to TV is you reduce the workload. I think a lot of indies might not have any choice in how reduced their workload is, but potentially, you know, instead of they've got 3 or 2 productions on the go, so instead of having 2 productions on the go, they only have 1 production on the go, but they employ the same amount of freelancers, but split the time. So you're not losing that amount of freelancers that will be working on the other production. And the benefit for companies, as well as obviously being able to look after people and help people pay their, at least earn some money, is that the freelancers are still there for when production does properly pick up. They're in a better mental state because they haven't been thrown into, you know, fast turnaround, go, go, go. We've got to make some content because we've been watching Dad's Army on loop for 6 months. You know, so they've got a rested workforce who, because obviously they're all juggling other things as well. So there's a lot of pros, I think, for businesses as well as for our workforce in job sharing or in work sharing, which I think is quite interesting. And you were on our panel for our very first event, Emma, and I remember, you know, we talked about how, and because you are one of us, you're still one of us, you're still a TV person, you know, how kind of TV is one of the worst culprits really for kind of providing this work-life balance and employing flexibility. You know, is now the time that TV has to change? They have to get on board, surely.
Everybody's changing. Every industry is changing. So we've been on construction sites where people aren't there. They are starting their day on video to get their morning briefings, and they rock up in the middle of the day to do their work. We've seen fund managers in asset management firms who have never ever said they would ever do a trade outside of the office, doing trades at home. So, you know, we are seeing all kinds of, we are seeing teachers teaching remotely. Now, there's a lot of issues around that, as we all know. We're just actually doing some work with the Department of Education right now on the flexible workforce. But every industry is having to pivot and change and rethink this. Now, notwithstanding, production is really tough, we know right now, and we know that the constraints that were there won't all go away. And all of those are commercial in terms of tightening budget, tightening commissions, etc., etc. But everybody is being creative with less at the moment. And so I would say the industry has a huge opportunity to rethink how people are able to work right now. And you know, everybody is watching business right now to see how they look after their people through this period, and business leaders, and how they come out of the other side. So, you know, we have a huge mental health crisis coming down the line. It's going to be really, really important for the industry, I think, to face into this and to use it as an opportunity to try and see how it can reshape how work is done.
Thank you. And I think, you know, a really important thing to say as well, you know, obviously in the work that we've done, we've been speaking to lots of people who are looking for flexible working. But since the crisis, we're suddenly getting people who would have never considered working flexibly being in touch with us. For example, you know, somebody whose wife is a key worker, whose grandparents would have provided childcare for their kids, now has no childcare. You know, the wife isn't around. They are used to working as an edit producer or whatever, and they can't commit to those hours. They need flexibility. You know, you've got people who maybe, you know, are particularly vulnerable to COVID, you know, thinking, actually, I need to work, but I don't particularly want to put myself on the front line, you know, out and about because I'm asthmatic or I'm pregnant. So there's a whole raft of freelancers who are suddenly finding that they need more flexibility than they needed before, and it's up to companies really to kind of provide practical solutions. I think
I would agree. And just one other thing to say, Michelle, is I think a lot of the reasons why people have said no have gone away. There's, you know, a lot of them are around trust. Well, you can't do this if I can't see you. You can't do this if you're not in the office. You can't do this if. People are doing it. People are actually doing things differently now, and I think will expect to do things differently. And I think really good people will walk if they're not enabled to continue to do things differently. So I agree with you, but I think it's you know, we need to trust people, we need to communicate with them, and we need neutral reasons why it's possible to work flexibly, not just because you've got kids or because of some other reason. You just work flexibly because you need to, and I think that's ultimately where we need to get to.
And you shouldn't have to give a reason, particularly. Thank you very much, Emma. Alex, we're going to come to you. I know we've already been sort of talking about the mental health implications of COVID-19, but you guys were talking about it even before all of this. I can't remember, it was when Looking Glass came out. It was sort of earlier, near the beginning of this year. Can you tell us a little bit about what that report highlighted about the conditions and the mental health of our workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to share some materials if that's all right, Michelle.
Please do.
So,
Aha!
give me 1 second. Can you see the slides?
I can see the slide. I can see the whole thing. It's not in a slideshow mode.
Yeah. There we go.
There we go.
So yeah, absolutely. I was just going to start I will come to that. Before I get to that, I was just going to start by talking a little bit about who we're talking about when we talk about people working in film and TV, and actually quite importantly, who we're not talking about.
Yes.
So, and I think one kind of boring but really important point that we've discovered recently just how important it is that the official government data on the workforce in the film and television industry is very poor. And that is because of the freelance nature of a lot of the work within the industry. And the Labour Force Survey, which is the Office of National Statistics go-to for understanding the profile of the industry, is not good at capturing freelance work. And arguably that is a large reason why a lot of people working within the industry have not found themselves represented well in some of the government schemes that have been launched around COVID-19. So boring but important. I won't talk to you too much.
Not at all boring. It's something that affects an awful lot of us.
So there's close on 200,000 people working within the sector, a lot of them within the production space. We know that more than half of them, we think around 100,000 of them, work freelance. And the numbers on the pie chart, again, is something we've only really understood in the last couple of months, which is they break roughly a third of them are operating as sole traders, a third as one-person limited companies, and a third is what we tend to call in the industry PAYE freelancers. And that's important because only people who are operating as sole traders get caught by the government self-employment income support scheme. We know that there's underrepresentation across a number of different dimensions in the industry. We do poorly on representation of women, of people who are non-white, of people who are disabled, and of people who come from family backgrounds with parents who have been in non-professional senior managerial roles. And obviously the industry is hugely concentrated in London. I think we all know that. I can scroll down. The other thing that we knew at the charity before COVID-19 even hit, which you've alluded to, Michelle, is the mental health crisis that faced the people working within the industry. And this was the research that we ran in the summer of last year, which we published in February, that shows, and I'm sorry, there are some quite difficult stats on here, so I do normally warn before we come to this, but 9 in 10 people working in the industry have had a mental health problem in their lifetime. So I often say, I think you can assume that anyone you meet working in the industry has had a mental health problem. That's a safe assumption to make within the sector, and that's significantly higher than the UK population as a whole, which is 65%. Worse than that, more than half have considered taking their own life, and that again is very significantly higher than the UK statistics, which come from the Mental Health Foundation. A lot of our work, and there are very long, very nerdy research reports, if you really want to go into the detail of this, was trying to understand why that was. And my huge simplification of all of that wonderful work is what we call the 3 C's: conditions, culture, and capability. Conditions is to do with the way we work, which I think is really interesting for this session. And one thing that we showed, and I think this is particularly relevant to flexible working, is it's less to do with the hours you work per se, it's to do with the control you have over those hours. So when you're doing a 12-hour day because you're nailing something and it's really exciting and you've got an enormous sense of satisfaction and fulfillment at the end of the day, that's one thing. When you're being told you can't get off set because to get to your kids' parent-teacher evening, to meet your mates on the pub, all things we would long to do now, that's when the mental health impacts begin to bite. In culture, what's really important, the things that, again, the 2 biggest determinants of mental health outcome are bullying. So extraordinary prevalence of bullying still within the sector. 84% of people working in the industry have experienced or witnessed bullying. And what we describe as this culture of toughness, this idea of survival, the phrase badge of honor gets used a lot, earning your stripes, which suggests that everyone within the industry has to conform to this kind of stereotype of being tough, which again is really problematic when we're trying to be inclusive. You will all understand what a huge impact COVID-19 has had on all of us across the country. We've been tracking a lot of the mental health research. anxiety and depression spiked on 24th March, was the day that lockdown was introduced. And it's remained about 40% higher ever since. And it's begun to ease off in the last couple of weeks, but it's still remaining very high for everybody. And then obviously for our workforce, as I was mentioning earlier, that is combined with the fact that almost all really of freelancers have been out of work. By 1st of April, we found that 93% were no longer working, and most are not covered by the government support. This is posing questions. You can ask me for the answers in a moment. We have some very specific concerns about the current situation. Very obviously, there's the health impacts, which have been shown to be more serious for BAME communities, with higher incidence of serious illness and death from COVID-19. There's been some new work recently about the financial impacts that show the greatest financial detriment to BAME and single parent families. The difficulty accessing work is really important, and this was just touched on. As the new production protocols for returning to work post-COVID-19 are beginning to be rolled out across the industry, which are obviously designed to protect people's physical safety, and I totally understand that, there will be those that cannot return to work. If you're categorised as vulnerable or extremely vulnerable, so if you're ill, for example, or have been ill or had cancer, or if you're living with someone who is, if you were living with an elderly grandparent, that would probably prevent you from returning to work. Anyone without with caring responsibilities, without school, childcare, other carers, and anyone with additional needs, which could include disabled people who might need accommodations made that won't be possible under these COVID-19 working conditions. The mental health impacts, we think it's not an overstatement to say that there has been something amounting to collective trauma for people working within the industry in the current time. We knew there were risk factors there already. On top of that, particularly for the BAME community, we've obviously got civil rights crisis at the moment after the death of George Floyd. There are very serious mental health risks for our workforce at the present time. And then over the longer term, we know we're going to go into a deep recession after this. That's very clear. There's some really interesting work from Directors UK that shows that 8% of women directors left the industry after the 2008 recession. So I agree with what Emma said about the opportunities. I think my point here is I think we need to work really hard to realise those opportunities. We're talking at the moment in TV about 15 to 20% increases in budgets because of the imposition of the COVID-19 production protocols. And there are risks, frankly, that some of the things that are really crucial to do with people's mental well-being, to do with the inclusivity of our workforce, to do with, I think everyone here can share a desire to create a positive, productive, happier and healthier place to work. I think we need to make sure that those things remain at the top of the agenda and aren't the things that get pushed down to the bottom of the agenda.
Absolutely, and I think you did an interview recently sort of talking about sort of why businesses should invest in the mental health of their freelancers, almost like a business, if you needed one, a business case for the mental health of our workforce.
Yeah, and it's a really, I think that's a very important point when we look at tighter production budgets. Deloitte have worked on this over the last few years, and in January they republished their report, which is called an investment case for businesses in mental health. And they showed that there's a £5 return for every £1 that's spent on mental health. So businesses, they get a lot out of looking after their people. I mean, it sounds like common sense, but this extra work that needs to be done to look after the workforce, to make sure that they can be healthy, not just physically, but also mentally, has a very clear business return for businesses as well. And that's, that is a drum that we're going to keep banging at the current time.
Good. Bang away. That's fantastic. And actually, we've been at Share My Telejob, we've been working with you guys and also with the TV Mindset, looking at how flexible working affects mental health and the different kinds of flexible working models. And it was really interesting. CIPD did a flexible working survey last year, and they looked at all the different kinds of models and what effect they had on the mental health of the people working. And they actually found, and I think you can guess what I was going to say, but that job sharing is the best form of flexible working for mental health. And I think there's a number of reasons why that is. One, the time off that you have, and we won't be going into, today we won't be going into how job sharing practically works. There's lots of information on our website that you can find if you want to kind of know the nuts and bolts, or please do email us. But they found that when you are job sharing, the time off you have is actual time off, because your job share buddy has got it. They are there, so you actually do have real time off. I know when I worked in production, I worked part-time after I had my kids, and what it really meant was that I was working 1 day a week for free with 2 children hanging around my ankles, which does not particularly make for a calm person. I think flexible working also can be a really practical thing about giving people time to have appointments, medical appointments, to go and see a psychiatrist or a therapist, to take their medicines, or go into the chemist and get repeat prescriptions. And you don't have to tell people why you're doing it. You can schedule it for those days that you have off. Interestingly, working from home and reduced hours were the flexible options that had were the least likely to make a difference to mental well-being. I think that sort of idea of isolation, we're all working from home. I think, you know, if you're not working from home all the time, it's probably a good thing, but all the time, obviously, it's difficult. So that was really interesting for us to sort of see that the research backed up what we were thinking. For us, I know in our experience, having a work buddy is a great comfort at work. You know, you mentioned sort of the culture of bullying that is in TV, and I think having a teammate that you can problem share or you know, or kind of work on problems between you before referring up to your boss, or just have somebody to go, did you hear that? Was that right? It's just having somebody in your little team, I think, is a great comfort and a great advantage. I don't know what you think about that, Alex.
I think there's a really important, and I think this could be a wonderful thing to come out of the current situation, is to grow the sense of community that exists within the industry. I think what you guys do embodies that, but actually more broadly, because you're right, quite often if you're freelance, you're in this intensely social situation one week, and then the next week you're sitting home by yourself wondering when the phone's going to ring for your next job. And isolation is, it was on the slide and I didn't really talk about it, is another key determinant of poor mental health for people working within the industry. So one of the things we're really keen to do at the charity is build that sense of community, foster it, help people help one another, and for anyone working in this industry to know that we've got your back. So if you've got a question or a concern, or you want to talk something through, you can come to the charity, and you can come to your friends and your colleagues within the industry as well. The support line, I'll do my plug for the support line. It's free, it's totally confidential, it's available 24/7. It can be a listening ear if you want to talk for an hour about a shitty day you've had, but it also actually has some really fantastic services behind it, including counselling and therapy. We've now got bereavement counselling, debt advice, legal advice. It's a great resource. We're also trying to do the things that help people help one another and do foster that sense of community. We've just closed out a community grant scheme, and we've got a new service called Big White Wall, which is available to everyone working within the industry, which is a mental health peer-to-peer support community. So I think for us, that's a real positive to take out of this difficult situation.
Thank you very much. You know, I think we kind of definitely kind of promote job sharing as a way of sort of supporting people with their mental health, but also supporting people, as I said, with a range of options. And people who have neurodiversity. My daughter has ADHD, and I know that for her it would be wonderful if she goes into the world of work that she has a job share partner that can do the stuff that she's not good at. So she's incredibly creative and great with people, but the idea of her ever kind of filling out some kind of Excel spreadsheet is just, well, it will never happen. So so there are lots of different ways that job sharing can be tweaked to help us retain diversity in our workforce. People with disabilities, it's an obvious idea of a way we could do that. Maybe somebody working from home, somebody on location if they had mobility issues, or just reducing that stress and that fatigue that they might be going through. So we see it as a really practical tool to kind of fit in with a lot of issues, obviously not solve them, particularly all of them, but it's something handy to have up your sleeve. I'd love to come to, thank you, Alex. I'd love to come to Mark now. Hi, Mark.
Hello.
How are you?
Very well. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm really happy to meet you. And I know my colleague Nat asked if we were relations. We're not,
No.
but I'm sure you're very charming anyway. Good surname. So at Studio Lambert, I know that you guys, pre-COVID had already started employing job sharers to work on your productions. I wanted to sort of ask you, why? What do you think they bring to a production? What are the benefits as far as you're concerned?
Well, I work on Four in a Bed, so I've been kind of responsible for the crewing up over the last few series, and we're a big team, and we found a lot of our time was interviewing, bringing new people onto the team, training them up. They come on, work for a couple of the blocks, and then they go off and do something else because they're long contracts. It's a very hard show to work on, and people do get a little bit fatigued by it. So we had a couple of our really good edit producers say to us that, you know, they loved the show, they were keen to stay, but they couldn't commit to the length of the contract. So they offered up the idea of the job share. And for us, you know, me and the exec at the time, you know, we both kind of thought about it and were wondering if it would work, if it wouldn't. But we gave it the opportunity. And it worked really, really well. And it didn't just benefit the two girls who were doing the job share, it benefited the whole production. It kind of it gave everybody more sense of flexibility. So, you know, they had their flexibility in their working hours, but it also lent another pair of hands into the production. So when we got a little bit busier, they would come out and, you know, they would do an extra day here and there to help out me and the exec. They would then cover for somebody else so they could have a holiday when they had signed up for a 6-month contract. And, you know, our other senior producer at the time told us that they needed a holiday, and we were a bit like, well, we're very busy. And at that time we thought, well, what we're going to do? But then we spoke to our job share couple and they were like, oh, well, we just cover it. So it's just having people that know the show, who are good on the show, being able to be around. And it was such a success. When I started crewing up for the current series, it was something I wanted to continue. So again, in the edit for when we eventually get to start again, we're going to have, we've got 3 senior jobs and it's going to be covered by 5 senior producers. So for me, it's an absolute win-win because I'm going to have very experienced people to be really, you know, to be there to help me. As you know, I took over exec in January, so to have other senior people around me is going to be great. So just, yeah, you know, for us, it was a no-brainer.
I mean, absolutely. I think, you know, so often, you know, when we talk to production companies, they see it as a kind of almost like a charitable thing to do, to offer flexible working, but it's almost what we want to do is kind of flip that around and say, actually, it's a source of incredible creative power. You know, you have, you know, it is that classic 2 brains for the price of 1, double the problem solving capacity, double the creativity. And then you also have some really, like, as you said, really kind of practical bonuses in that you have seamless sickness cover or seamless holiday cover. And, you know, and that's one of the things that, you know, we're going to be talking about later is, you know, as we kind of move back into production, and obviously we're going to have to be thinking about, you know, our health and the health of our crews. And, you know, what happens if, you know, your producer's husband goes down with a fever the night before you're meant to be on location, and he has to then, or she has to then, you know, quarantine for 12 days or 14 days or whatever it is. Actually, if you're job sharing, you've got somebody who can, you know, it's almost like having an A team and a B team who can kind of cover for each other. It's one we should be thinking about.
Completely. And I think what we're also trying to do, we have, because of our show, the nature of our show, we are always casting, really. There's like a small break when we're not, but what we're trying to do is train up the casting team to be able to join the location team, and then the location team to be able to drop into the casting team to kind of make it a bit more, you know, so when there are gaps in production on the location side, people can drop into other bits which they weren't necessarily, you know, that experienced in. But we're kind of building like a very flexible team that can cover here, there and everywhere. We managed to film a couple of blocks just before lockdown happened. But we did, you know, as a couple of the guys out on location started to show symptoms, so they were quarantined. So we had to drop people in at quite short notice, people that weren't necessarily up to speed on the show as well as they could be. So the idea behind everybody having a little go about on everything is to try and make the team a bit more flexible. So when problems do happen, which they always do on Four in a Bed, we've got people there to come in and cover it. That, you know,
you've got nerves of steel, Mark. I mean, I think one of the things that COVID has shown is that how much of production can be done from home. I mean, thinking about, we had an email from somebody who runs a casting team regionally, and you know, she said, I've cast the whole show from my living room. And actually, you know, is this going to be something that's going to be really favourable to our regional workforce, and that, you know, suddenly instead of holding audition tours and having to do recce's all over the country, you kind of have casting teams that that can work in their locations, in their regions, and then feed back to you, from their living rooms.
Our casting team is set to start again in a month's time, and they're all going to be working from home for the first month anyway, at least. And the way we're going to be doing recce's is going to completely change as well. We're going to, instead of sending people out all around the country, we're going to be asking our contributors to kind of do a bit more of a DIY type audition, as it were, just for like safety reasons to start with, but also I think we can kind of get through the workload a lot quicker and kind of cut down on the travel, and it just takes people off that going out on the road for weeks on end, casting, when they can be kind of, finding people rather than traveling. So that's, again, I think that could be a positive that's come out of all of this. But we'll have to wait and see.
Maybe save a little bit of the budget as well from sending your casting team all around the country.
Production they quite like that idea. So
lovely. Just we talked about when you were hiring your edit producer, Job Share Pairs. What kind of doubts did you have, or what kind of conversations did you have to convince people that this was a good idea? What kind of doubts did you have to have allayed, I suppose?
I think the doubts are that, you're suddenly dealing with two people, and they have different strengths and different weaknesses. But the way it kind of worked, they treated the role as if they were one person. They would deal with the handovers between themselves, and they just and then they would report back and speak to us as one person, rather than, you're getting different messages from different people. And that just made it very, very simple. I think the doubts are, it's more of how it's going to work with one person, but you didn't with two. But now we know how it worked with two, and it works. So we don't really have any doubts anymore. I think it's just the doubts were there because it was new and untried on Four in a Bed. We have so many rushes to go through, and there's enough obstacles in the way as it is. So when you think by trying something new might change, might make it worse, you might not go for it. But we did, and it worked, and we're carrying on.
Well, I'm so pleased. Well, thank you, Mark. Another company who've kind of embraced it are Lime Productions, and hi, Rebecca. One of the things that Share My Telly Job do is go to production companies and train people on the why and the how of employing job shares. We provide case studies, testimonials. We kind of talk about, how you can structure contracts, how job sharing could work for different roles. And Rebecca was one of the people who was at probably, I think, the last training session we did before lockdown. And I hope you can say that it was maybe enjoyable, or at least interesting. But tell me a little bit about, why are Lime kind of positive about flexible working? I mean, I was blown away by you guys and your attitudes.
Well, look, fundamentally, we've always supported job sharing across all of our productions. There seems to be at least a couple of job sharing roles. People primarily want to do it in the edits because it's a little more stable, but we've got 2 SPs that job sharing as we speak, which is brilliant. We obviously find it, advocate it, because I think you were talking about it earlier about, why would somebody be concerned about doing job sharing? Well, from our perspective, you know, in television, it's made up of majority of freelancers, and you're only as good as your last job, and it's all reputationally based. So you can rest assured, all of the people that question it out there, that people that put themselves forward in television for job sharing are going to do a brilliant job. There's no way they're going to let you down, because otherwise they're not going to get asked back. So find that people in job sharing are going to give you even more. Yes, you get the 2 brains for the price of 1, which of course is brilliant as well. We all love that, because actually television is so subjective, and you've really got to interrogate what you're making, and to have another brain there to do it and somebody to bounce off really helps. I think it, you know, you've also touched on this before, but it also helps just in terms of sharing that load, because in television, it is demanding. It is a pressurized environment. It can be very hard and taxing and tiring. And when you've got somebody there who's supporting you along the way, and somebody that you can bounce off ideas and get some reassurance from, then that's going to make you bring more to the project and actually deliver in a much better way. So for us, it's a really important element, and something that we would absolutely will continue to embrace moving forward.
That's wonderful. And I was going to sort of talk to you about, you know, obviously, you know, as kind of production goes ahead, and what kind of things are you putting in place, I suppose, to kind of fit in with the new guidelines around COVID, and what's your approach going to be?
Well, it's difficult. We've made 2 programs in lockdown. We've made Diva in lockdown, and we've made Gog's Story so far. And it has been, you know, I think the team have done incredibly well to do all of it remotely. We have set up remote edits. We've got edit producers working remotely. We've got everybody working from home. We had the directing of Diva. You were literally watching all of the screens like a gallery on Zoom from your own home, and you could hear the director talking from his own home. So it was a remarkable achievement, if I'm honest with you, from the teams. There's lots of things that we've got to put into place. We've got Towie that's about to start. That's a massive production with a lot of people that we can't gather together anymore. You know, there's no space for it. So we've got to think about who actually need to be in a room together, and everybody else will have to work from home. And that is really good for some of our, you know, we've got 2 execs, you know, one's working from home at the minute and also having to do homeschooling, which is difficult, whilst the other one, she's managed to pack her children off to school, so she's lucky, so they can balance each other out as well. And they're sitting at the top of our production. So COVID is presenting a lot of challenges, but I would say it's really interesting in that it's almost brought job sharing more to the forefront and more important than ever before. Because as you were talking about earlier, if somebody does get sick and you're out on a shoot and someone gets sick, if they're job sharing, the next day you can have somebody in there to replace them, as opposed to putting more strain on the production to try to find somebody else to replace them. So yeah, COVID, difficult, but we are working our way around that landscape, and we will endeavour to, you know, obviously fall within the restrictions and make sure that we, you know, adhere to all of the restrictions. But so far, so good.
Oh, good. Carry on with your success. I really hope it continues, and that's great to hear that's kind of, that job sharing and flexibility is kind of really part of your kind of plans for how you're going to produce stuff. I mean, it's amazing. I think, you know, I think I touched on this earlier, but, you know, there are a lot of really talented freelancers that, you know, you guys are going to want to employ on your shoots who may be vulnerable. You know, obviously we can talk about, you know, Black and South Asian communities who are overwhelmingly being affected by COVID, and, you know, they need to work. So, you know, as we all do. So, you know, by being able to provide job sharing and working from home, it's a way of protecting people that are vulnerable, but still allowing them to work. So again, you know, looking at people maybe with underlying health conditions, such as asthma or whatever. So I mean, that's, yeah, I think it's a really useful thing, and it's great to hear both you and Mark speak so positively about it. It's really great. Waqas, we're going to come to you now. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm whizzing you all through, but I really want to make sure that everybody has a really good chance to speak, and that we get a chance to go and read through all these amazing questions that I can see ticking up and down my screen. So, Wakas, I wanted to talk to you first of all because Netflix came out really strongly, I think, at the beginning in support of freelancers. Obviously, you know, you made a great donation, a large sum to the film and TV charity that, you know, that did not go unnoticed. I think all the freelancers were incredibly heartened by the fact that you guys were leading the way. Also, the billboard that you guys put up about proclaiming that you will work in this town again, I have to say I cried when I saw it. I think it was such a positive message, and I think, you know, it came at a point where so many of my colleagues were completely despairing, actually. So it was a real beacon of hope for us all. So I want to say thank you, first of all. But I wanted to ask you why. I mean, it was you were very obviously sort of leading when it came to sort of broadcasters and the big companies with that statement. Why was it important for you guys to make that statement?
I mean, I think to start off with, we are incredibly lucky to be working in an industry where we're creating this amazing content on a daily basis, right? And we woke up one morning and the world changed. It changed and we were all sort of lost, scared. And I think the easiest sort of way to be able to, you know, get out of that would be, okay, like let's look for my next job. Let's look for my next, you know, my next paycheck. And I think the idea of trying to sort of just be human, and the fact that actually, if that was you, what would you want to be? And how would you want to sort of be looked after? Interesting, you mentioned the hardship fund. So I'm actually relatively new to Netflix. I've only been working there for about 3 months. So
congratulations. What time to start, blimey.
So my first day was actually the start of lockdown and the announcement of the hardship fund. And for me, I got an email and on my first day, and I read that. It was very humbling to, and actually quite a proud moment for my career, actually, to know that actually for an industry that's made of freelancers, if we didn't have freelancers, we wouldn't have an industry, right? And to be able to help, and in any small way to offer a token of respect is such a humbling position to be in. And I just want to mention some of the things that the other panelists have been saying around sort of flexible working and for freelancers, because I think it's an absolutely fantastic conversation to be having around flexible working, around offering those opportunities. And it's something that I think as an industry, we're a little bit late to the party on, but I'm really glad that we're having these conversations to get there. I also think that it's not an option for everyone, right? And I think one of the biggest elephants in the room when I talk to, as a business partner to freelancers coming in is, what about the money? Like my money's going to be hard if I job share. And I think that's a very real concern, particularly in COVID, right? Particularly where there's been months and months where people are outside of work. So I think it's important for us as production houses, as studios, to really offer the right solution for freelancers. And that conversation starts from the recruitment process. It starts from growing up. It starts from incorporating that as an option for our freelancers to say, you know what, life's not what it was like 3 months ago. And what works for you? And it's our responsibility as an industry to really offer that as an option. And just because we can, shouldn't mean that we should exploit that either. So just because, you know, shared working might be an option for some people, it might not be for another person. So it's really important that we sort of keep that conversation quite open and quite transparent as an industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, you know, we did a little survey at Share My Telejob talking about, you know, would you consider sharing your job if you knew that it would help your mate pay the mortgage? Is quite an emotional, probably quite manipulative question to ask. But I think there is that feeling that, you know, as freelancers, we're often, you know, very isolated. You know, you work very intensely with somebody for 3 months and then you don't see them again for 3 years. And I think during this crisis, I think we have all, you know, bonded and become much more connected through webinars and things like this. And I think there is that feeling that we want to look out for each other as well. But of course, you know, job sharing isn't for everybody. And I wondered what your thoughts were. You know, should this be something that is a conversation that should be led by the broadcasters? You know, should it be coming from you know, the BBC, Netflix, Channel 4, whoever, saying, okay, you know, you need to make sure that there is a quota, a percentage of all your jobs on your productions are flexible?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, the conversation starts with the people in positions of power. I understand that actually every interaction that I've had with somebody who's in a job share has been at that senior level. So if I was a newbie trying to crack the industry, it's very difficult for me to have the confidence to say, I'm new, I might come from a BAME background, I might have a disability, I might have children, I've got all these things that I want to sort of bring to my job, but I'm scared. And we have to appreciate that that's that is a scary conversation to have, and that responsibility absolutely lies with us to make that space for people to put their hand up and say, you know what works for you, and let's see if we can work around that.
Absolutely, it's about normalizing that conversation, about it not being like, you don't want to, if you've got caring commitments or you've got, a number of issues, you don't want to make yourself any more awkward to employ than you already are. But so it's about kind of making it a normal thing, talking about it with our production companies about this is the way you do it. This is practically how you do it, so that it's not a scary thing to ask and it's not an awkward thing to provide, I think. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what sort of the flexible working policy is like at Netflix. Is that something that you can see kind of coming to the fore, in productions moving forward?
I think it's definitely a conversation that I've been having a lot more with my production partners internally and externally. It's something that we're really encouraging people to have, to understand that actually the landscape is very different. It is very different right now. So it's something that we should definitely have as an option for people.
Thank you. I mean, I think you touched on it earlier. You said, if we don't have any freelancers, then we can't make any telly, which is clear. And, I think Viva La PD, who are one of our buddies, they put out a survey recently. I think it was almost like 50% of freelancers are considering leaving the industry at the moment. And so I really kind of wanted to ask you, what's the future? How do we retain the talent, and what is the future for our industry if we don't keep people?
Yeah, I mean, it's
in some form of work, even if it's only half the week.
It's a really sad reality that people are not getting what they want from this industry, and actually that's all our responsibilities to face and make that sort of change. I think, it's functions like mine. It's production HR. It's a function that never really existed 2 years ago in the UK. Yes. Very American-centric thing. So feeling, giving freelancers a space of community and a space of belonging, and having somebody to champion freelancers and being an advocate for them is actually the future. I encourage everybody to really look at their organizations to see, actually, we need to make this space for freelancers, but actually, it will help every aspect of the production lifecycle, not just the people contributing it, but actually the product as well. It makes your product safer, it makes it respectful, it gives people a voice. So I think the future is, without plugging my job, it is production HR. It is getting that function integrated into your ecosystems.
Absolutely. And this kind of leads very neatly actually to my next question, which is, Netflix does seem to be leading the industry in a number of respects, including having, your role, which is fantastic. How do other companies or other broadcast or production companies kind of follow your lead in a way of kind of building loyalty, attracting talent, leading change, and, building themselves as a brand that cares? How do people follow your lead?
I can't speak to how other brands do it. My advice is very simple. It's be human. We work with people. Let's not forget that. Everybody has a history and a story and behind them, and they bring that, sometimes 12 hours a day. So it really is to be able to connect with the workforce. It's not alien. We've been doing it for years, right? Getting to know and meet people. So it really is as simple as that. Be human.
And then fundamentally, that will allow you to tell better stories, and stories that apply to a greater number of people, which is, you know, when it boils down to it, that is our business. And if we can retain a diverse and wide-ranging workforce, then, you know, we have a better chance of being better storytellers, I presume.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Waqas. It was lovely to talk to you as well. I feel very spoilt speaking to all you lovely people. I would like to now come to Sarah. Sarah Lee is at the Talent Manager. She runs the talentmanager.com, and we were very excited. We've been partnered with Talent Manager for a couple of years. They've been incredibly supportive to us at Share My Telly Job. And they've recently put in a whole new job sharing function to their amazing website, and I think Sarah is going to talk to us about, maybe you could tell us a little bit about why you decided to do it, and then show us how you make it work.
Yes, great. I mean, we wanted to do it because we felt there was a moral imperative to do it, and we wanted to get job share out into the open to be discussed on a mainstream platform. I was actually going to share my screen, but I think we're kind of quite tight for time. So, and I think Louis, who loses the signer when I share my screen, so I won't do that, but we have got a kind of video available of how job sharing works on Talent Manager, which we'll make available with this recording afterwards on our blog pages. But in essence, what the functionality we've built does is it enables companies to search for not only people that are open to job sharing, but for experienced job sharers. So if they haven't employed a job share pair before, they're able to kind of try it for the first time, knowing that they've got the confidence that a pair have done it and worked together before. And what we've also built is the functionality for a pair of job sharers to make one joint application, and also to network through the site and meet job share partners. Although what we're also doing is kind of referring people to Share My Telly Jobs website, because they're the experts and that's the best place to find resources and to also potentially find job share partners. So you can do that side of it on either site. The companies, the idea with the companies too is that companies get badges when they have employed job share partners before, so companies become accredited job share employers, because we realized that if we just asked companies whether they were open to job sharing, they would all say yes, and it would just be lip service. And so once companies have employed a job share, they get a badge to say that. And yeah, so I think that's the essence of the functionality that
absolutely. And we were thrilled, Sarah, when you guys went for it, because, you know, it's all again part of making this a normal conversation. You know, production companies can go to the site that they use anyway for crewing up, and it's not, you know, it's not another stage to then look, and it's not any more difficult. It's very easy now for companies to look for job sharers, and then for job sharers to be able to apply through the Talent Manager for those jobs is fantastic, you know, for everybody. I think it also takes away that awkwardness that we were talking about before.
That's the thing. I mean, for us as a platform, you know, the companies are our clients too, and you know, we're very conscious that it's our role to keep talent within the industry and to be able to kind of continue to provide companies with the best people. So and it's really not a kind of moral, I mean, on the Talent Manager, we've built a whole host of diversity tools. So over the last couple of years, we've got a diversity search engine. So if employers input that they're looking for whatever type of production person they might be looking for, there's a secondary tab which brings up people that fit that bill or that cohort, but from diverse pools. And we've also got a kind of suite of reporting. So because the Talent Manager is about companies building up their networks of people that they want to woo, and it's about them thinking about the makeup of their organizations long term. So the diversity reporting gives them stats, not just in terms of how many job sharers are in their network, but also in terms of the gender makeup of their network, the makeup in terms of ethnicity, and it's really quite detailed. It's socio-economic as well. So our partnership with you guys was just the last in, or the next, I should say, in a kind of suite of kind of diversity initiatives. We've also got unconscious bias tools, so companies can search for people minus pictures and minus names. But yeah, I just think it's a priority for kind of people in our situation to be kind of pushing the industry in the direction that we know is best for it.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. And I would really, I would encourage businesses and freelancers alike to go and check it out and check out the video that will be attached with the recording of this, of how the functionality works, but also just go and have a little snoop around. It's actually not very difficult to work out. So thank you. We're coming up to a Q&A section. And we're coming up to sort of nearly the end of our session, so we're going to whiz through. Please, if you, I know that a lot of people have been answering questions as they come up. Please do email us. You can through our website, through sharemytelejob.com, if we don't get to your question, and we will be replying to as many as we can.
Could I just say as well, Michelle, I'm really sorry. I think we've got a couple of polls that we'd like to
get
people to answer before people drop out.
Yes.
We've got very easy multi-choice 4 quick questions. If there's time and we could do that, be great.
Absolutely. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen there's something that says polling. If you click on it, you'll see there's 4 multiple choice questions. It would be really valuable to us if you could take the time just now while you're listening to me blathering on to click your thoughts on the polls. It would be a wonderful source of information for us as we move forward. Thanks, Sarah. I had it on my list and I'd skipped it. So we're going to go into the Q&As. We had people have been emailing us questions all week, and then obviously you guys have been messaging as we go along. So this is a really interesting one and actually very topical. I've been a producer in factual television for the past 16 years, and unfortunately for the past 13 weeks, I've been extremely ill with COVID. It seems I'm one of the ever-increasing number of people with what doctors are now calling long-tail COVID. I've been left with debilitating symptoms and severe fatigue. I'm hoping that gradually over the coming weeks, I'll be able to recover and would love to get back to work when I'm feeling strong enough. I rarely see job shares advertised, which makes me concerned because I'm not sure I'll be able to go back full-time work for a long time. Could you give me some advice as to how I could approach employers about the possibility of job sharing and how to pitch it? I think, this is a reality that we may have to face over the next few months. It's a horrible one, and I'm very sorry to hear that you've been so poorly. I hope you feel better and get back to strength as soon as possible. But yes, could you give me some advice as to how I could approach employers about the possibility of job sharing and how to pitch it? I mean, this is you will find lots of resources on our website about that, but maybe I can also talk to either Mark or Rebecca about, is there something that you guys are considering, and how would it be best for them to approach you? I don't know what.
For me,
throwing you in there.
When it comes to job sharing, if the people come as a pairing together to start with, that becomes a lot more attractive proposition. It makes it a lot more long-winded when you're trying to put 2 people together and you're trying to, make sure that they get on a work level, but you also have to get on a personal level. So if this person can find somebody that they think they would work well with and then approach a production company, I think that's a lot more of an attractive proposition.
Come with a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. The 2 people starting with me in October, they came to me as a pair. I interviewed them as a pair, and it just felt like a normal job interview. It didn't feel like anything different. But if you're wanting the production company to kind of set all that up for you, I think that might take a little bit longer and might not be, it might not happen as quickly as perhaps you might like. But yeah, if you think you've got somebody in mind for that job share position, pitch it to talent managers at different companies, and I'm sure somebody will bite your hand off.
And there are lots of resources as well on our website as to sort of what to look for in a potential job share partner. It is a bit like a marriage. So there's lots of factors that you need to consider, but thank you, that's great advice. Another question here. My concern is that there may not be enough work to go around. Would individuals not working have an opportunity to be put on a call list to cover productions for illness, kind of like being an understudy? And could this person receive a simple wage for doing so? I'll ask you guys in a minute about this, but we do suggest that job sharers have more than one partner. We're not into monogamous relationships in job sharing, to cover for the fact that you can mold your offering as a job share according to the job that you go for. So it might be that you're going for a fact ent, one of you is very entertainment, the other has got lots of more hardcore documentary, but together you provide the right experience. Or you can pull in different people. It also allows you to kind of allow for people who might be poorly or get pregnant or whatever it is. It's nice to have your career not tied to just one person. So it might be that now with COVID, if you're a job sharer, you look to have a number of job share people that you could partner with in case of illness, that you could then draft in another replacement without wanting to sound too callous. I don't know, Rebecca, what do you think about that?
I think it's interesting what they're asking is essentially, when you've crewed up for a job, if somebody falls ill, or if somebody can no longer fulfill their commitment, that you've got this other understudied person that could pop in that doesn't want to be working full time. So it's quite interesting. I mean, we haven't necessarily explored that, but as an option, in terms of the fact that you're an up and running production without just being made up of job sharers, and to have an understudy that's waiting in the wings, it's an interesting concept, as long as they're in line with the show or the job that you're doing, because that's what's quite difficult, is that depending on where you are, things can be quite niche in terms of just in reality, just in what type of job you're doing. But I do think it's an interesting concept to have, not necessarily to go as a job share, but to be almost like an understudy if something else happens. Interesting.
Sub bench, bring you in from the bench. We've got a question here from a producer director who would like to work part-time or on a job share rather than as a permanent role. His question, I think it's a he actually, says, given enough notice to spread out the deadlines, do the panel see it as feasible to run a production using a producer on a flexible 4-day week, meaning that they would go up to 5 days full-time when needed during filming, but balance out the time by dropping to 3 days during research or even editing? Sort of having that flexibility within a contract. I don't know who wants to take that.
I mean, I can take that again, but we do that now. So we do that with our execs on TOWIE. They will start on 4 days. Then when filming becomes more difficult, they'll go to 5, and then they'll go back again. So we kind of move in terms of the requirements of the job. So yes, sometimes when you're leading up to a production, you don't need to be there 5 days a week, but when you're in the thick of it with filming, you do. So if somebody wanted to do 3 days in pre-prod, that's fine. And then when it comes to filming, 5. So we are doing that currently, and it works.
Brilliant. And that's something you can also do with job sharers. You can say, look, and I'll come to you in a minute, Emma, is that you can say to your boss, look, you can have both of us full time if you want during this run up to this shoot, because it's going to be absolutely bonkers, and then you'll have double the hands on the pump, so to speak. Emma, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add a couple of points on that. I think there are some really good examples. I mean, the guys on the panel are talking about it. And what we've seen, just in the context of other industries, is one of the best things you can do to persuade executives to try things is to show that their competitors are doing it. So I think there's something about being able to tell stories and tell the case studies and start to talk more about production companies like the ones on this panel who are doing this. Because it's about flipping that switch from, well, this is kind of what normal is, as opposed to what's not normal. And the other thing, just to say we always advise candidates, when you are trying to ask, I mean, I would agree with Mark's point, it's much harder to, we shouldn't expect companies to find us job shares. It's much easier as a pair, but there are obviously great platforms where you can find other job sharers. But always lead on your skill set and why you're good for the job. I think we sometimes just got to be really careful people want to work flexibly, but it's hard if you lead on the fact that you want to work flexibly or that you're looking for a part-time job. Lead on how amazing you are, and then when you're in, have that conversation about what people will be prepared to offer in terms of flexibility, because fundamentally they're buying your talent. And I think we just got to remember that, and obviously everybody's got it. How you need to work is just different. I just wanted to make that point.
That's a really valuable point, actually. Yes, no, thank you for that. I've got one more question, and then I can see that the polls are in. So I'll just quickly do the last question, and then we'll have a look at those. So this is a really interesting one. So I've worked in drama and commercials and animation. I've developed 2 chronic illnesses recently that have left me disabled and affect my mobility. And it's meant that I've had to semi-retire from the industry as I struggle to get any work that can fit around my hospital appointment schedules. And also where the typical 13-hour production days didn't leave my body broken. I'm intrigued as to the changes that may come into effect due to COVID-19 that means that the industry may see part-time or job sharing become more common, and so voices like mine do not get shut out. I'm only saddened that this has had to take a global crisis for anyone to take this seriously. So she's really, I think it's, I can't remember who this is from, but they're advocating for job sharing opportunities within the industry to accommodate people with disabilities. I mean, I think, you know, this is something we touched on earlier, but, you know, I think the 2 biggest reasons why people with disabilities or, you know, illness struggle to stay in our industry are stress and fatigue. You know, being in pain is incredibly tiring. And, you know, and obviously home working is one option that we've now seen can work brilliantly, but I think it's also important to sort of say that, you know, if your mobility isn't a problem, then, you know, being able to job share in a way that allows you to get out of your house and be with people in an office is also something that could be really valuable. So I think, you know, and reduce that isolation. So I think, hopefully for you, that one positive thing that's come out of COVID is that, you know, that you will have more flexibility and more opportunity. I know I can see Wakas wants to pitch in here.
Yeah, just a quick one. I mean, just even pre-COVID, I think it's important to know that it's an employer's responsibility to create reasonable adjustments. And I think regardless of, you know, the effects of COVID, even before that, we should be making the space for freelancers to be able to have that conversation about what reasonable adjustments should be made to accommodate things like disabilities and you know, anything else that might sort of pop up. So I think it's important for us to remember that conversation is still as important, if not more, post-COVID.
Thank you very much. Well, we're running fairly over, so I'm going to crack on and have a look at these poll results. Can you all see the poll results, or is it just me? I don't know if you can, but so really interesting. So the first question in the poll was, has COVID-19 increased your need for flexible work? 77% of you said yes, 24% said no. So we can see that there is an increased need for flexibility, as we kind of guessed. Question 2, are you more likely to leave the TV industry if flexible working isn't available? Now that was pretty much a 50-50 split there. So that's quite, we'll have to have a think and maybe delve more deeply into that. As a freelancer, would you be confident to ask an employer to let you work flexibly? 60% said yes, you would be confident to ask. 41% said you wouldn't. And I think that's, you know, when we go back to what we talk about, you know, being confident to ask for what you need, you know, not wanting to make yourself awkward. I think, you know, in this industry, we will all feel like we're very lucky to be working in an industry we love, but that can mean that, you know, you want to make yourself as easy to work with as possible and put up with, you know, a lot of, you know, difficult stuff. So hopefully we can make you more confident to ask as we educate more employers on how easy and brilliant it is to provide flexible working. The last question, which has got a really good result here, I think, should broadcasters have quotas targets for flexible working across their productions? 88% of you said yes, that you should, which, you know, gives us our next thing to crack on with. Do any of you want to chip in and have a chat about these poll results?
Fascinating. I think probably the 50-50 might be sort of money, just to say.
Yeah.
But I'd say on the point about people wanting quotas, it can be quite tough. There's a big debate around quotas. I think what we would argue is that there's something about enabling the industry to think about the waiver in terms of working time directive. Clearly that's a big challenge, we know, for many people. But there's also something about being able to give support. I mean, WACAS clearly gets this from an HR resource, that there's not enough training and support for people to understand how to design jobs differently. And we need to see how we can help put some investment in the industry to enable production companies, because most production companies want to do well by their people, but to enable them to work out how to do that. So I think there's always a balance between a bit of enforcement and quotas, but also providing the support that the industry needs to work out how to design jobs differently.
Thank you. Yes, and that's it. You know, I think any companies who want to learn more, please do get in touch. The training, you know, that we provide for companies is the only income that Share My Telly Job gets. So we're obviously very keen to promote our training, but also I think we hope to be able to provide you guys with very clear, practical advice on how to make it work, because we're very sympathetic to the fact that indies at the moment are kind of squished and having to deal with stuff from all sides. So we want to be able to help you guys on this particular issue. I think that's probably the end of our session. I would really love to thank all the panelists for your very wise words and your insight. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you to everybody who responded to the poll, who's been listening in. Please do check out thetalentmanager.com, check out our website, sharemytellyjob.com for more information. Natalie, I can see, has popped back up again. We will be working very, very hard and consulting with all these lovely people who've spoken on our panel today to see how we can really make practical changes to make sure that production comes back as strongly as possible after COVID. So thank you very much. Sarah, is there anything I've forgotten? Okay, good. Well, I think I might wrap it up. I never know how to end these things. Thank you very much to everybody, and yes, be in touch, stay in touch with us. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye. I don't know.